Hello, I'm Richard Burton from the Richard Burton Watercolour channel here at Bempton on the Yorkshire coast, and it's on the coast we're going to be today. We're going to do a seascape today, and we're going to do something really different from what we've done recently. We're going to show you in full format. We're not going to time lapse, we're going to show this video in full format, so you'll see every brush stroke in its entirety. And not only that, we're going to show you a simple seascape that's going to paint onto moist and damp paper, and how you can capture the atmosphere of a seascape really simply by following some simple steps. And I think you're going to really enjoy this. And before we start, let me introduce you to our watercolour guide, which is in the link below, totally free. It's what we've been working on for some time now, and I know a vast number of you have downloaded it and finding it really useful and getting some great feedback on this. This is for you. It's if you're new to watercolour or you're coming back to watercolour, there's some really 5 simple steps to follow. It's a really sort of something to get you back into it, get you inspired, get you enthused into watercolour. Please use it, grab it, it's a free copy, and let me know how you get on with it. Right, this is the picture we're going to do. It's a Bridlington Bay from further down, more towards Hornsey, looking towards Bridlington, and let's get down to it. Okay, so let's get started. As you can see the picture in the top left hand corner there, it's a seascape that we're going to do, and we've got an early evening scene, and it's all very soft colours, soft diffused washes. So let's start. I've got my number 16 round brush, and I'm going to wet the paper first. I'm going to give it a thorough wetting down to the horizon line, which is roughly where the cliffs are and where the sea meets. Wet that, give it a good wetting, make sure that we've got that nicely evenly covered in water. And once we've done that, we will then start adding the colours. Right, so we're going to start with mixing some cobalt blue, and we're going to drop that in to effectively a wet surface, and the colour's going to diffuse, and that feeling of diffusion is something I want you to get a hand round, I want you to get a feel for, and it is about getting a feel for, because you'll drop the colour in and it will diffuse on its own. I'm just going to steer it round with the brush a little bit, but essentially it's going to just steer itself into the picture. I'm going to leave a few areas of white cloud, and as I come down, I'm also going to mix in a little bit of Prussian blue into that cobalt blue. Just give a little bit of colour change as you go towards the horizon, and then just drop that in towards the horizon and the lower area of the sky. And now I'm going to deepen some of the colour, add a little bit more colour. I'm also going to tidy up, making sure that I've got an even flow of colour, and not only that, I've got no standing water. I want to make sure that it's all going to dry fairly evenly. Now I've got some tissue paper. Catering tissue paper is pretty good. It's a sort of a fairly heavy tissue paper. I'm going to screw that up and then roll that onto the paper, and that's going to lift off some of the blue colour and create some of the sky clouds that I want to capture, and also give me some drier areas on the paper, because what I'm going to do now is going to mix some really stronger ultramarine blue. I'm going to drop that in, and that's going to drop down, and it's going to be what I call finding lost and found edges, which is really about the colour's going to drop down, drop around. It's going to find some hard edges that I've left. It's also going to diffuse into the underwash as well, and that will create some lovely skies. Now, the shape of the clouds is important. As a golden roll, I say they are big and bold higher up in the sky, and as they come down to the bottom towards the horizon, they tend to be much more linear looking. And also try to join them up. There's nothing worse than having individual clouds. If you do that, they tend to look a bit more childlike, whereas if you join them up into layers of cloud, they look much more believable and effective. Now I'm going to get my brush, I washed it out, and I'm going to squeeze off the moisture, and I'm just going to lift off some of the clouds so I get those diffused high level clouds that will just appear, and just do a few of those just to break up the shape of the clouds. And then I'm going to mix some light red and create a little bit of a grey, and then drop that in with the cobalt blue and use that for the shadow area of the clouds, and just drop that in nice and simply, and then drop it in other areas of the sky just to give that hint of colour change, and it'll create a lovely three-dimensional effect to the clouds. Again, it's all onto the moist surface. The paper is gradually drying, but it's gone from wet to now to a more of a moist surface, so the colours I'm putting in effectively will hold their shape, they will diffuse, but they will not create hard edges. And now I'm going to do the same process, but add a little bit of crimson into the clouds nearer to the horizon. Just pale, crimson's a very strong colour, and I'm going to add just a little bit of that just into there to, again, that three-dimensional feel to the cloud shadow on the horizon area. And then my next trick is to add a little bit more deeper blue into the higher reaches of the sky, just to give that contrast and give that further feeling of depth to the sky. And hopefully you'll find that by doing that, you're getting the clouds are starting to come back and what I call singing. The picture's starting to sing a little bit more at you, and you really get a feel for a lovely warm sky. Now we're getting to the final touches, which is going to be to mix some yellow ochre, very pale, and now I'm just going to drop that into the cloud area in parts just to give some warmth to it, because at the moment we've got all the cold colours in, we've got a little bit of warm grey, but I want to give some warm highlights, and I'm just going to drop that into the sky. Again, it wants to be still on that moist surface. If it's dried, it's too late, so just make sure it's on that moist surface. Just drop that in gently and flick the brush about, so I'll get some warmer cloud highlights, and also there'll be some white highlights in there as well. And just drop that in. All again, I'm just delivering that extra bit of three-dimensional look to the cloud. Now, if I have got some hard edges, what I'm doing now is I'm just dried my brush and I'm just teasing it on the surface of the paper just to soften up some of the harder edges that just might have appeared. Do that delicately, just sparingly, and then simply leave it. The final touch to the sky is to add a little bit more crimson and Prussian blue towards the horizon line in a linear brush stroke, so you just get that feeling of distant clouds just above the horizon line, and just carefully drop those in. And I'm just going to diffuse that in, but hopefully you can get a sense of that distant layer of cloud. Just carefully do that, and then you complete the sky. Now, after letting that soak in, it's not fully dry, but I've given it a long enough time to sort of soak in. I'm now going to mix some sea colour, which is going to be Prussian blue, ultramarine blue, and I'm going to start with that on the horizon, and then as I come across the sea, I'm just going to leave the headland, leave that little bit of white paper for the headland, and then as I come down, I'm then going to use a dry brush technique and come down with some crimson, just to give that colour change. So I'll go from a blue to a crimson and even drop in a little bit of yellow here as well, just here and there, just to give that nice shallow water look. It's on to dry paper, but because I'm using a big brush and I'm revisiting the colour, I'm going to make it quite wet quite quickly. But I'm also going to leave some of the white areas for the waves that are coming over. I'm just going to leave those. We'll deal with those later. And as I come really into the front of the picture, which is the very shallow water, it becomes much more of a crimson feel to that blue-grey in the foreground. And having that colour change, it really gives that feeling of depth. So when you look at it, you can see there's blue in the distance, and you've got a little bit of crimson where I've left some of the white waves, and then I've got a little bit of yellow ochre just dropped in there, just to give a little bit of a hint of colour change. And then in the very shallow it's more of a crimson wash. Okay, so now we'll start on the beach, and what we're going to mix here is going to be some cabin yellow and yellow ochre, and I'm going to drop that in onto a dry surface with a big brush and bring that down towards the foreground. And as I come to the foreground, I'm going to add some burnt sienna, and I'm also going to add a little bit of cobalt blue into the mix to create a bit of a grey wash. Now, while that's still soaking in, creating that moist surface, I'm then going to mix a bit of Prussian blue and alizarin crimson, and I'm going to drop that into the foreground just to create an extra bit of dark, and let that just run up against the wet shallow water. And then I'm also going to move the brush into the distance and let that create the first element of darker sand in the distance. Now, while the beach is soaking in and that's diffusing, I'm now going to put the first feeling of the waves, the shadow in the waves, and that's cobalt blue and burnt sienna. Just very pale, and just drop that in, just gently leaving some of the highlights to show. And then I'm going to mix some deeper blue, ultramarine blue, Prussian blue, and a bit of burnt sienna, making a really strong dark. And I'm going to put my first feeling of the headland, the darker rocks in the distance that are just sort of the beach is sitting on. Just drop those in, and then while it's still wet, I'm going to use that dark and just bring it into the foreground of the beach, just to create some shadow and some just interest in the foreground of the beach. It doesn't need to be hard edges. You'll get some hard edges and you'll get some soft edges, but just put those brush strokes in place. After I've done that, I'm then going to mix a warm colour, which is going to be yellow ochre and a bit of a cadmium orange, and then I'm going to start to put the headland in. I'm going to leave the cliffs, which are the chalk cliffs. I'm going to leave those, but I'm going to put a lot of the headland in, and then brush from the left to the right and work my way across with that lovely warm colour. As I get further out, I'm going to add a little bit of blue to it and weaken it as well, so it's just a bit more diffused. So you've got that stronger orange, yellow, and then that diffuses to just a very pale orange in the distance. I've now swapped brushes to a number 10 round, and I'm just going to lift off some of the paint in parts, particularly on the horizon, just tidy up that horizon so it doesn't diffuse totally into the sky. I want to have a diffused look because I want a warm day or a warm evening, so I don't have a crisp edge between the sea and the sky, but at the same time I want to have that defined area. So I'm just lifting off. I'm also going to use the brush to lift off in the foreground and just give a little bit of highlight in the foreground in the shallow water. I'm now using the same brush, using cobalt and crimson, and I'm just going to put just some shadow in the shallow water. Just delicately drop the brush in, and that will just give another layer to that very shallow water. I'm now going to mix a really strong dark, which is going to be basically Prussian blue, burnt sienna, and I'm going to drop in the dark areas of the cliff, foreground cliff areas, just drop those in. I'm also going to add a little bit more Prussian blue and yellow ochre, create a little bit of a darker green as well, just to drop that in. Just give a little bit of colour variation, even in the dark area will help. And I'm going to take that small brush that I've got, smaller brush, and just create some dark in the middle area where there's a shadow casting across the headland, and I'm just going to put some dark in there as well. Just drop that in. This is all more on the dry brush technique, just dry brush onto the surface. So I'm going to create a few edges, but the underwash is still damp in parts, so I'm going to get that lost and found edging look, and just work my way along the headland now with some blue and red, just to create a bit of a shadow-like colour, which cobalt blue like red will do. And then I'm going to work my way along just to give some definition and some little bit of hint of detail, but not really detail, but just capturing the light on the top of the cliffs, which will be enough to give the feeling of that distant headland. I'm now going to build up some depth and detail and depth of colour, some of the stronger darks on the headland, and I'm just going to make in a blue and a brown, and I'll have plenty of that in my palette now just to drop in, just to create that bit of depth in the distance, and put a few marks on the very horizon just to give a feeling of some structures, but no definition, just a few hints of objects on the horizon. And now mixing a purple grey, which is essentially cobalt blue and alizarin crimson, with a little bit of yellow ochre, and I'm going to drop that into the foreground, and that's going to blend across the shallow water and also onto the beach. And it's just going to go onto a dry surface, but I'm going to quickly flick the brush across so you get that some dry brush techniques, dry brush broken edges, as well as a few little diffused brush wash marks as well. Now I'm mixing some stronger dark cobalt blue burnt sienna with a little bit of alizarin crimson. I'm going to work into the cliff again and just drop some harder edges in there, and then I'm also going to bring that dark down and put some dark marks in the beach to give that feeling of shadow and potential have some rocks on the beach. So I'm just going to use that. These are going to be just simple flicks of the brush to give the impression of, again, lost and found edges. Nothing too detailed. If you keep it simple, your eye will want to interpret it and it'll look really effective. If you try too hard, it can look a bit false. So just put some flicks in the beach and bring those down. And I'm just going to gradually add that, and that will give some real definition to the beach. I'm now mixing some shadow colour, which is a blue and a purple, which is obviously the ultramarine blue and the alizarin crimson, just to give us sort of a bit of a shadow colour. I'm going to put that around those areas of white that were left for the waves, and that will just give that feeling of waves that are just coming ashore with that little bit of shadow. I'm now revisiting the beach and adding some further dark flicks of colour into the beach, and also putting some pale purple colour into the shallow water area as well. Gradually building these up to give that feeling of definition and depth. I'm also going to use some of this purple in the distance as well, just to give another little bit of a visit to the cliffs, just to give another little bit of a colour variation, just subtle bits here and there, just to give that sort of feeling of flowing colour, which is really quite effective. I'm now mixing some really stronger dark, which is going to be deeper ultramarine blue, burnt sienna with a little bit of crimson, and I'm going to put those really stronger bits in the foreground, just to give those feeling of stones once again, and marks in the beach, which will contrast against the now dry, lighter areas of the beach. And now mixing some stronger dark, which is cobalt blue and burnt umber and burnt sienna, and I'm just going to put some hint of really strong dark into the waves, just to give them that feeling of three-dimensional look. I'm also going to revisit the beaches again, just dancing the brush here and there, just to give that extra little bit of dark. It's all quite wet now, and I'm just going to finish off by putting a few figures, just suggestions of a couple of figures and a couple of dogs, using ultramarine blue and burnt umber, and that should hopefully be not too detailed, but just enough to give the feeling of some interest in the centre of the picture. After that, we'll let it dry, grab a cup of coffee and enjoy the picture. Okay, so there we have it. I put a mount around it, as I often do, and what we've got here is a really simple fast and loose watercolour onto damp and moist paper. Remember, we've done a few different techniques: lifting off, putting in the layered washes, and obviously just layering the darks onto a moist and damp surface. And understanding those damp and moist, different moisture of surfaces is really crucial. And as you can see, we haven't really got overlaid in detail, we've just kept it simple. We just at the end, we put a couple of figures in the distance, and then we put these shadows in. And all in all, I think we've got quite an effective painting. And I really hope you've enjoyed that. And I'd like you take advantage of the fact that we've done it without time lapse. You'll see every brush stroke, so everything is in the timing. There obviously has been a gap for drying, but don't worry about that. You know that, and just enjoy it. Just get down, have a go, and enjoy it. And let me know how you get on. Now, before we go, don't forget to like and subscribe. That's all helping us getting picked up by the wider audience and really making watercolour really successful again, and fashionable and enthusiastic, and all the things that really make us wanting to get into painting. And I think we're finding that. I mean, at the end of the day, we've nearly got 4,000 subscribers now, which is absolutely fabulous. And we're really enjoying this. We're really enjoying the channel, and we're really enjoying getting all your comments, getting all your emails, and helping you with some of your paintings as well. It's great to do that, and please do send me some more. Send me whatever you've got. If you've got some ideas of what we'd like to do as an image or as a painting for future videos. Alternatively, if you've got some problems or challenges that you're finding with watercolour you want a bit of advice on, please fire them at us and we'll get back to you. So in the meantime, all I've got to say is enjoy and keep painting.